Welcome to the Graveyard Girls podcast with Amelia and Natasha. Hello.
And welcome to another episode. And today it'll be one of my cases.
It is.
However,
Yes.
before we get into it, we've only just got back into recording because both of us kind of died in the plague. Of the plague.
We've had like a 3-week break recording.
Yeah, which we've never kind of left it this long before. And obviously for those of you that are following us a lot, she's still got the plague. Obviously for those of you that like follow us every week, you know that we've been running our story competition, and for the last week of each month from November to February we were going to release an episode with all of your entries. However, because we've been a bit poorly and a bit sickly, we've also been a bit naughty and like kind of not done any podcast work, which meant we left ourselves very, very short to put together December's episode of story entries, and we haven't had time to actually record us reading out the entries, which means unfortunately for the last week of December there will not be the story competition entries. Well, it's not that we're not going to do them. We're going to make up for it in January by doing extra,
A double.
Yeah, so
extra long.
It's just a bit delayed, so I will make a post for this over on Instagram so everyone knows about it. But yeah, basically I porcupined when I said we're going to do the last week of every month because
Our intention
was to do it,
and we weren't planning on getting ill.
Yeah, basically we just haven't had time. We had a couple of days and all the entries came in and we read through them, we're like, yeah, that's brilliant, and then we're like, oh shit, we've actually got to read these out and record them. It's just 1 month, like we didn't have any audio ones, so we couldn't just like throw it together into an episode. We needed to actually read them out, and I was like, yeah, we don't have time to do this.
And last week I literally lost my voice.
Yeah, then Natasha literally lost her voice, so she couldn't do any reading. And I didn't want to butcher everyone's stories because some of them have got dialogue in, and I felt like Natasha could probably do a better version, like with her little voice.
No.
But yeah, so we needed to put it all together, and we obviously needed a week to then edit it afterwards to make sure it sounded okay. And yeah, we basically just didn't have the time to do it. So
So in short, next month.
we will do an extra episode to make up for it, to add all the entries. So please keep sending them in. We've not forgotten about them. We just literally got really behind with it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could just keep sending them in, and we'll get through them. We'll do extra next month to make up for it.
We will.
But I think that's that little note. Do we have anything else important we need to share?
No, I'm just dying.
I'm dying of a cough. Yeah, basically Natasha still hasn't, I don't think, completely got rid of her plague.
It's not even like a proper cough.
I think that's what's more annoying though, because it's like you sound like you have a fake cough.
Yeah.
I hate that.
It's like I can feel it, but it's just like it's nothing when it comes out.
Yeah, and you sound a bit pathetic, and then you just sound like you're doing a fake one, but you're not doing a fake one.
So kids that cough with their tongue.
It's like you have to almost then make it really more dramatic to make it sound real. Okay, well today's episode it's about solving crime, because obviously I sort of started a bit of a series and was doing the decades, and this time again I'm going to lump a couple of decades together. So I'm doing solving crime from 1930 to 1950. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit like last time. I'm going to do a bit of a brief timeline, and then I'm going to split it into little sections. So I'm looking at mainly policing in the UK. So in 1930, police cars were now being used more widely by officers to attend and respond to crimes. And this was so we could have a fast response. At this point, we just obviously had just had
rather than a man running.
Yeah, it was basically just like one man on foot with a truncheon, and that was it up until this point. And we'd obviously, the cars had been around a while, but one, the cars weren't particularly fast, and two, they were expensive, so not everyone had them.
Thinking about it, why is a policeman allowed a truncheon? Like, he's allowed to whack people?
I just think
that you see them hitting people with them. Like, how is that allowed?
I don't know.
Well, it's not allowed now, but like...
But it was then. It was just a policeman with a truncheon. Yeah, I don't know.
I was going to call it trunch ball.
I think, to be fair, I'd be more scared of the officer with a truncheon than one in...
Oh, I just remembered something very graphic.
Oh, okay. But you know what I mean? Like, if I saw an officer come in, like, if I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, I think I'd be more scared of that officer with a truncheon. Like, I feel like that'd be more of a deterrent than, like, whereas now, like, you might get caught for your crime, and if you do, you get thrown in prison for a little bit. Like, whereas back then, like, you're going to get battered. Like, they might batter you to death. So, like, that's more of a deterrent not to do the crime. And there was more of them walking about because their job was, they were known as, like, beat bobbies, weren't they? So they actually wandered around, like, waiting for a crime to happen. You didn't call them after the fact. So
To be fair, someone we both know, he told me that he got whacked on the back of the legs by a police officer. I was like, is that loud? I was like, what were you doing?
I mean, yeah, they're not supposed to.
They're not
but
supposed to. I
yeah.
think they're trying to get him to move.
Probably. But yeah, I'd definitely be more scared of the policeman back then with a truncheon.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
There's no rules back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Police brutality wasn't really a thing.
Well, it was a thing. It was common.
Yeah, but they like didn't see it as an
Yeah.
issue. It was like normal.
So
It was
I'm
allowed.
I'm the police officer. I'm allowed to do the beating.
Okay. So, also in the 1930s, two-way radios were being used so that police officers could communicate with each other more easily. However, the early days of this, the connection wasn't always that good, and quite frequently they'd dip into areas and then they couldn't hear them anymore. So, it was a bit patchy, a bit hit and miss. I feel like it was better in the cities than it was in the counties.
So you're probably only allowed to like talk to each other within 2 feet, and it's like, well, we can just talk.
Yeah. Shout it. Okay. Then by where have we gone? In 1935, a number of forensic science laboratories were built just like the one established in Cardiff City Constabulary, and this was to help store and analyse evidence that had been collected, because by this time they're actually properly starting. I think they've realised the importance of collecting evidence, but it's a case of like, okay, well, what do we do with it? So yeah, basically this is the first time the labs start popping up because they actually want to, I don't know, store it properly. It's probably and analyse it. I think it's more now that being a policeman has become a proper job, because back in the early 1900s, like, you're basically paid the same as a labourer. So it wasn't good pay. I don't think anyone was really that interested. Like, if they caught you red-handed, good. If not, I don't know.
Oh, it'll go unsolved forever.
Yeah. Whereas now it's a good job, like it's seen almost
Yeah.
as a bit of a career, like people actually, I don't want to say that they want to solve the crime more, but it's like,
There's an incentive.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's expanding. I think, like I said, they've also realised the importance of it, and crime is starting to change.
Yeah.
So it's becoming more of an issue, so that it's almost like they're aware they have to address it.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, also in 1935, the Metropolitan Police Laboratory opened for the first time. So
okay.
it was basically, they had only a couple up and down the country, and like every evidence from everywhere was sent to these places to be analysed. Then in 1937, the emergency telephone number 999, which is the one we still use today, was introduced so that the public could contact the police faster.
Is this when we have the thingy phones where you have to go like to the end of the thing to get to?
Yeah.
Why did they put 999 then? Surely you want the quickest one.
I don't know. That's a good
Because you've got to wait for that thing to come back round.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about
Like
that.
9.
I think maybe it was just easier.
9. It is.
Maybe it was just the easiest one to remember.
9.
Maybe because, you know, when the telephone came out,
Hmm.
like, maybe without sounding silly, like, maybe, like, one was already, you know, like, the other people had already
It's like the prime
taken the
minister was
number.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I have to find that out. I'll find that out for another episode.
Just 111.
Yeah.
Why put like the emergency number at the end? Because you
There's
have.
got to
it's
be a
the-
reason why that number.
I can't remember what those phones are called.
Dial.
Dial. Yeah. So if people who are younger than us don't know, phones used to be weird where you used to have to like put your finger in a hole,
Yeah.
go to the number,
number.
and then like
Let it ping back.
yeah, which took a while
Yeah.
before you could do the same
Again.
number again. That took forever.
I'll find out why they picked that number. I'll
Okay.
find out and let us know for another episode.
Okay.
Okay. Then by the end of the 1930s, police motorbikes had been introduced as a mode of transport.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
I don't know when I thought motorbikes were created.
They were about pretty, like, a little while before this,
Okay.
but I don't think they considered using them in the police. I don't know why. I feel like they started off more rural
Yeah.
because they were like nippier and easier to get them
Yeah.
out,
It's just like
and they could
one
kind
up
of go
from the
off
bike.
road.
Yeah. It's one up. Get launched off a motorbike off road.
I think it's just more cost. And I think then they see the cars, like, you can carry all the equipment around in it and things like that, or you can have like multiple officers in a police car and
You could have a couple on a police
motorbike.
bike. Yeah.
but yeah, so that was the reasoning behind that. Then in 1946, women working in the police service no longer had to resign if they got married. Obviously, a lot of jobs at this time, most jobs, as soon as you were married, you couldn't work anymore. Which I don't really get why.
You served your purpose.
Yeah. I think it's like you're allowed to be independent and earn your own money.
Yeah.
Until, then, like, now you've got a husband and he can provide for you, so you don't need to, like, you don't need a career anymore. Yeah, it wasn't just the police. Like, this was a nationwide thing. It was a lot of jobs. Secretary jobs, they'd allow you to sort of, like, you could keep your job.
So that's
okay.
That's allowed because,
but like any other sort of job, I think I think
weird.
most women naturally gave up work anyway to look after children. No, but a lot didn't they? Because most people, I mean, people were obviously having sex out of wedlock, but
they were not.
Obviously, a lot of people they'd get married and then 9 months later a child magically appears, so they need to stay home to look after the kids. Like, it was just how it was. So a lot of people a lot of women never went back to work.
But back then, one income could support the entire family. Whereas now, no,
definitely not.
Not even two.
Yeah, still struggling. Also in 1946, the fraud squad was set up. Obviously, crime is now sort of rapidly changing. And again, also in 1946, the dog handling unit was set up. Now, they had used dogs before. I want to say it was between 1900 and 1910 the first one came out.
I think so.
However, it was just the odd one here and there. And they were used, like, you know, when they knew someone was dead, it was basically searching for a corpse. But now they had special dog handling officers, and they were now used to help find missing people, property, drugs, and to detect explosives, because we'd obviously had the war. So they, like, expanded their use.
Okay. Yeah, because then the dogs did have jobs during the war, like doing little things. Yeah,
so it's the first time they've actually made a proper unit for them. Okay, so then in the 1950, the tape lift method was introduced when collecting fingerprints and other traces of evidence.
Ooh.
So it's the first time, like, they've made it, like, mainstream. So, yeah, some scientists have been working hard. So then I want to kind of go into the forensic science advances. Now, obviously, again, like in the last episode, we covered the First World War. We've obviously had the Second World War in this period. And again, things kind of get a little bit stunted in between. Because,
naturally.
Yeah, we have to, I don't know, we get a bit distracted by the war, basically.
Just stop starting wars.
Yeah. So, though the first forensic science labs had been introduced in 1910 in France, the UK's Metropolitan Police didn't open theirs until 1935, as we'd already discussed, in Hendon, which was obviously in London. It had just 6 staff to run it.
For the whole entire London?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
These labs looked at everything from blood to hair to identifying body fluids. Oh, not in the detail that they are today. Like, they're not looking like at semen, like who did it belong to. They're basically identifying, like, that's blood, that's semen, that's vomit, that's animal.
That's poo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's kind of like, the science wasn't that advanced then.
Sniff test or something.
Okay. They were even able to look at bullet comparisons after the comparison microscope had been introduced in the late 1920s. So basically, they would have also had the forensic labs, but they would have also had, I believe the term is gunsmiths. So basically people that work with guns. And they would look at the marks on bullets and then being able to compare it and match it up
to the
guns
that was used.
Okay, so obviously that's quite important, because I think we've had gangs before,
yes,
but there's a lot of gang wars sort of cropping up in, like, the 30s and stuff. So I feel like a gun's quite a big choice of weapon.
Yeah, but
especially after the First World War, there's lots, like, sort of dotted about.
Yeah,
we kind of brought a lot of guns into the country.
But I think there's also, like, a communal gun, so that's just like, that's Jimmy's gun, but, like, anyone can use it.
Okay. At the same time, over in America, the FBI had opened their first crime lab. And in 1937, a man by the name of Walter Specht, who was working at a university in Germany, had developed and worked on the chemical we now know as luminol, which is obviously used to test materials or items for blood, even if a killer had cleaned up. So this now obviously was a massive advance in the sense of they could go into a crime scene and what looked like had all been cleaned up, they could now use this luminol spray.
Can you imagine, like, creating something that, like, does that?
Yeah, I know.
You'd be like, ooh,
so
magic.
So, like, obviously this was just before the Second World War broke out. But yeah, it became a major thing because, like I said, obviously so many crimes, killers could either move bodies or clean bits up. But now they could go back and like put it on clothing, and clothing that they'd probably attempted to clean. Obviously, it doesn't completely get rid of the blood.
No.
It could now show up stuff. So whereas before they go, oh, well, it doesn't look like that man's trousers had any blood on it. Now they could prove that it did. So yeah, obviously
That's amazing.
it is. You don't. And I don't know. But you think it's later. Like you think post-war, don't you? But yeah, so
Because like the tape kind of threw me off. I was like, we had tape. Like,
yeah, no, I didn't think about that. But yeah, we obviously. I suppose we did have like parcels and stuff. Like you think like by First World War we were parceling everything. I know most of it was done by string.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did have different types of tape. I think they were already like advancing it because you think it's a very early 1900s was obviously like the 1800s into 19th was Industrial Revolution. So everything's going on mash. You think all these big companies and things, they've all expanded. They all need to package everything off. So I suppose tape would naturally sort of follow. They've had to find ways to package things.
It's just weird when you think of like things being invented and you're like, oh.
Yeah, you still think of, like, obviously it's 1930s by this point, but I don't know, sometimes I still think of everything being like steam powered, and in reality that was like the late 1800s.
They had tape.
Yeah. But in reality, that's how much we advanced in that short period of time. And yeah, I think it's easy for us to forget.
Yeah, because we literally have like anything that we can possibly think of already created.
Yeah, we've not had to invent any of it. Because I don't know, we're lazy.
I think...
And a bit stupid. I think we have all gone a bit stupid, to be fair.
Maybe, but I also think like, well, what's the next thing that we can create? Obviously, you create something out of nothing, and then that's the thing.
Yeah, like now we're having to go into space because we've gone to...
Yeah.
We're running out of things here.
Well, if we kept going to space from the 60s onwards, we would have been creating new stuff by now. Yeah. But obviously, I think Richard Nixon stopped that, so that's his fault.
Okay. Well, you never know. Next 10 years.
No, we're too far behind now.
Okay. By 1940, the crime labs weren't just using science to look at blood and fingerprints to help them solve crimes. The chemist Vincent Hinster was the first to analyse ignitable fluids, which of course would open up the doors to lots more crimes being solved or being able to be carefully looked at to help find perpetrators. Because by this point, I should imagine, like, if a fire happened, they'd be like, everything's been destroyed in the fire. Whereas now, if they could look at ignitable fluids, they could maybe link the fluid to a perpetrator. So like a particular, like, have like gasoline and all the different things. They could go, this is this type of igniter fluid, and then they'd find who they believe to be a perpetrator, and they could, I don't know, have some of this fluid on their clothes, and they'd link it that way. So clever. Yes, they destroyed the evidence in the fire. However, they'd taken some of it with them. So yeah, I think that obviously massively helped solve a bit of a loophole in where a number of crimes had happened.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be clever to think about that. Like, there's obviously an accelerant, so we need to find it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the one to find it.
And I feel like it's quite easy to, like, sort of spill all these things. Even like petrol and things like that, it's easy to transfer it onto different materials.
Yeah.
So... Oh, and then, in terms of fingerprints, obviously this happened way back in the late 1800s. But at that point in time, we were obviously just documenting them and keep them in a file somewhere for all the criminals. But someone had now put together that it might actually be useful not only to find criminals, but to help name corpses that had otherwise gone unidentified.
Oh, so this is the first John Doe?
So, no, they obviously had John and Jane Does all this time. They were just never... They never worked out who they were. Oh. But by this point, by the 1940s, someone going, actually, should we start fingerprinting the dead people that come in?
Oh, I thought you meant like they were like naming them John Doe. Okay, I see your point. Okay.
So rather than just up until this point, they were only collecting fingerprints of criminals and people they arrested. And then someone was like, hang on, let's start fingerprinting all the dead people that come in. And then if someone doesn't come and claim them or identify them, we can keep it like maybe either it could be the fingerprints of a criminal, or later on, I don't know, they could link it to something else that belonged to a person. Yeah. And then, hopefully...
figure out who that person is.
Yeah.
It's good thinking, like, this person was a person when they were alive. Yeah. They need to be found.
So, rather than just bringing them in, having a poke around, see how they think they died, they're using a bit more of an initiative to work out who they are. Okay. So then from 1930 to 1950, Chief Constable Captain Athelstan...
That's the name.
Popkes. Yes, Popkes. A fucking mouthful, basically.
Yeah.
I think he would have been a captain, like he would have been some army officer, and then he became the chief of police. But you keep the captain.
Yeah, you don't drop any of your titles. So it's like Lord, Reverend, Constable,
So and so.
Archbishop. So, okay.
Okay. He would transform the British police from the beat style policing to the much more modern reactive response. Okay. So by using two-way radios, policemen were able to get live updates on ongoing crimes. This meant officers could collect colleagues on foot and take them to incidents, and they even worked on and developed what was known as snatch plans, in which police cars were plotted in key road junctions in event of serious crime. So this is, I don't want to say high speed chasers, but like this is where the sort of the first thing came about. Obviously, we had lots of people like robbing banks and things like this became a massive crime. So they were actually plotting police officers at certain things, either to pre-catch gang members or like people trying to make a getaway. They'd have someone plotted so far ahead, and they'd be like on the radio, like they're making it this way to this so and so road.
See, they're learning. That's good. That's good.
They also had something known as Q cars or Q cruisers, which were unmarked cars or delivery vans, which I thought the delivery vans was a clever one. They were used to conduct covert patrols.
Ooh, and you see that in the movies all the time.
Yeah. But I don't know why you associate it with like the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
But it was happening, like they were making that transformation but like into the 30s. But obviously, again, it got a bit stunted during the war and then kind of picked up more in the 50s. By 1947, he'd also implemented the use of the automatic burglar alarm systems, which helped report potential break-ins directly to the police control room, which had their own cars ready to be instantly deployed to the scene. So it wouldn't have necessarily been in homes. It would have been like big factories and like big businesses to start off with. But like now, you know how it's normal to have like your little alarm system outside your house. Basically, this is... He didn't obviously invent that, someone else invented it, and then he decided to use it. So maybe they started off with big companies that were seeing a lot of losses or a lot of crimes. They would link up to them and it'd be linked directly to a control room.
I think all of them, like businesses and homes, should do that anyway.
We do kind of,
yeah.
Yeah, basically these systems that are installed, like a lot of it now is done by computers. Yeah. But like when we were little, there was actually a control room. So like basically it rings through and then someone, it works a similar way to now. You know when old people have a panic button? Yeah. Basically they let it off, someone then rings to make sure it's definitely emergency, and then they send someone out as a response. And that's basically what happened back then. Which is a clever idea, really. Yeah. So obviously I can't ignore the fact that we had wartime during this period, and that, like in the First World War, had an impact on policing.
Well, the men disappeared.
Exactly. So although women could now serve, it was still mainly a male-dominated role, with many of them going off to fight. They obviously needed to find alternatives. So just before the war had broken out, there was roughly 60,000 police officers in the UK, and they made up for the loss of male officers sent to war by using the reserve police, special constables, and more female officers. By 1944, there were 43,000 regular officers, 17,000 war reserve police and special constables, and 385 female police officers, whereas prior to the war, there'd only been just under 300 females. So the women didn't increase that much. They still massively got more men into the police force. But yeah, more women sort of made it into the actual service, into a paid role, rather than in the First World War. They were the women's reserve, so it's all like volunteer. You didn't get paid.
But I think maybe at this time, most of the women went into factories because that's what was needed.
Yeah, and they took over lots of roles like farming and things like that, like at home, or certain factories still continue to make things, so they kind of stayed there. Many older officers did not retire at the age they would have normally retired. Instead, they were used to police the expanding duties that had to be taken on by the service. So these extra tasks included enforcing wartime blackouts, assisting rescue services during and after bombing raids, checking on alien enemies, which we obviously discussed as before is basically not foreign people.
Alien, yes.
Yeah.
As soon as you see that word, you're like...
very angry. Okay, and pursuing army deserters. They, of course, still needed lots of police on the ground patrolling the streets, as rationing during the war had led to looting from bomb-damaged buildings. Yes. And there was a big increase in black market trading. They also, these older officers, the ones that maybe couldn't keep up with all the, rather than just giving them clerical work, which was mostly women, basically.
Yes.
They sent the older officers out to schools to inform children of the drills and what to do during a gas drill, and also the dangers that were associated with the bombings and the raids. They did little school talks, which was quite.
I'm just picturing Dad's army throughout all this.
Yeah. So I think
Captain Mannering teaching some
they
kids.
might have previously kind of sent people into, but I feel like this is the first time they're doing like school talks. Like, you know, now like we have so many people come in from different places to tell you about things. I think this was sort of the beginning of it. Like, actually, this is a good way to get the message out. So they kind of started that, which was good. Okay. So then we obviously had the reserve police, and this, like before, is broken into lots of different categories. So we had the first reserve, which were police pensioners who had been retained, and they would continue to receive a normal salary. Then we had the war reserve, which was men under the age of 30 who were called up to the police. So some of them before, they would have been sort of volunteers. They still all, when the war wasn't going on, they still had a volunteer police service.
Yeah.
So these men, because they'd worked so long, they would be called up to the war reserve, and they would be paid. But then as the war progressed, many of those, because they're in the police service, they were automatically then sent on to work for the army, and they would have had sort of their own regiment, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So yeah, basically they all stayed together and worked together. So as the war goes, obviously at the beginning it wasn't conscription, so you didn't have to take part in it. But then, as we know, as it progressed, they're like, every man's got to go unless you have an exemption.
Yes.
So we also had the Women's Auxiliary Police Corps, and these women were employed to carry out clerical and chauffeuring duties, and they did receive a payment. So they were specifically just for those roles, and obviously that was dealing with, it could be people ringing in saying, I think I've seen a German, blah, blah, blah. Like, they had extra things. Like, they had to also deal with the petty crimes, but a lot of it was wartime related, because people were very paranoid. So, like, they'd see someone that looked a bit unusual, and they're like, there's a German bomber in the bakery or something. Yeah. And, it was up to these women to deal with it, and they were chauffeuring people around.
I think the Queen was... She was a woman auxiliary something.
She had something.
It might not be that, but she was part of something like that.
Yeah, I think she might have helped oversee some of the the other women on the ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We then had the special constables, and these were unpaid men, so volunteers, who would, for whatever reason, not have been called up to serve. So this could be like, I don't know, due to a disability or their age, they were too old. And they basically filled out your basic sort of job. So they'd be like your old-fashioned beat officers, so they'd be on the ground, and they'd also help with things, you know, when the air raids went off, they'd be like ushering everyone in and making sure everyone was safe. And then when the sirens went off, they'd be the first ones to go out and check to see if the coast was clear, that sort of thing. That was their job. We also had the police auxiliary messengers, and these were boys between the ages of 14 and 18 who were recruited as volunteers to assist the police with communications by delivering messages on foot or by bicycle. So I think in states of like emergencies, so before it would have been like, maybe if they had information that there was going to be a German bombing raid that night, like it was like, quick, get all the messages out and send them out to everywhere. It was just easy to get young boys to, well, not young boys, they're teenagers, aren't they? Obviously some of them would have been naughty and lied about their age and gone into the army, but the others I think would have felt a bit surplus, if that makes sense. I
remember reading, this might just be bullshit, but I remember reading a few years ago, during the Second World War, they tried to get young boys to pass messages on, but the boys spoke too much, like they'd just gossip, so then they started using little girls to do it because they did the job. I
feel like that could be a thing. Okay. So after the war, most reserve police officers were discharged from service. However, surprisingly, a large number of them remained and went on to be recruited into the police service to serve as either regular or special constables. So it's not like they just left everyone without a job. A lot of them, they kind of reformed the police service and kept most of them on, which was quite good. And although police were obviously unarmed at this point, in terms of like they don't have guns like they do in America, during the war, officers had each been armed with rifles to use as protection from enemy action or to assist the armed forces. So I don't think they obviously were given guns, but I think it was more in case of, you know, like suddenly the Germans came, or like they managed to get across shore, all of them would have been brought in to help the army defences.
They need a weapon.
So I don't think they were massively actually used, but they were put out there and provided just in case.
But they're just like, oh, what are we supposed to do with this?
Yeah, no, what do we do? Okay, so then I was thinking about obviously like punishments and stuff during the war and like the types of crimes that were going on. So as we've already discussed, obviously looting and black market sales were on the increase during the war. And obviously that took up a lot of police time. However, there was also an increase in murders.
Well, I did cover one.
And I also covered John Christie, who weirdly got in through the war reserve police. And which episode did you do yours in?
The Blackout Killer.
Which I think only came out, was it last week or something? I can't remember.
Yeah,
I want to say episode like 101
it's not,
or something
not
like that.
long ago.
Yeah, not very long ago. Obviously, we had a lot of air raids going on, which meant large numbers of people died, and it made it near impossible to investigate a crime because basically it was just a pile of rubbish, like rubble.
Yeah, you just assume they died in the bomb blast.
In the bombing. So yeah, a number of crafty killers took advantage of this and either disposed of
threw the
people
body
in the things or used the air raid rather than going straight to the air raid shelter, would use that as an opportunity to kill a family member, then run. Obviously the house would collapse, or they'd hope the house would collapse. And yeah, then they were like, oh, they died in the air raid.
Oh no.
Yeah, and because obviously there was less people like coroners and things like that around, they weren't really investigating, unless there was something like strikingly obvious.
Yeah.
That they'd been murdered. They weren't really getting investigated.
There'd be too many bodies to get through, I think.
So I feel like we might have had quite a few unsolved murders going on there, but like they didn't realise they were murders. They were just put down to got crushed by a building. Yeah. Okay. So it's estimated that during the war, Britain saw a 60% increase in crimes.
Oh.
Yeah. Obviously, these were only the ones reported, so there's a chance that there was even more. We obviously also had the issue that large numbers of trained officers had gone off to fight, so their expertise couldn't be utilised because we were running on volunteers effectively. London gangs also increased in numbers, and even fraud saw an increase, which is why I think probably in 1946 they invented the fraud squad. A whole host of scams had popped up, most of them surrounded selling fake ration books and clothing coupons, and it was reported that one gang alone stole £14,000 worth of newly issued ration books and sold them on the black market, making a profit of £70,000, which is over like £1 million today. Other scams included doctors selling military exemption cards to men wanting to avoid being called up. We then also had people making false claims against their houses being bombed after the government had set up a scheme which offered money to people who were left homeless or their houses got destroyed. We also had a big issue surrounding crimes committed by American soldiers because we had a bit of a jurisdiction issue. But interestingly, the main issues of actually crimes between American soldiers was between the American soldiers themselves, and that was because of a bit of a race war. It was between black and white soldiers. So they were having a lot of pub brawls and like sort of fisticuffs, and then they'd have a fight, and then it's like, well, we kind of need them to go after war now, but like also they committed a crime on our test, so like what do we do? And then there was the ones at the end, and they were like, we're sending all the Americans back to America, and we're like, yeah, but hang on, they committed a crime here, so we want to keep them here.
I know, this is the frustrating thing about, you see war stuff and you don't see the black people who fought, you just see the white people who fought, or depends on like where in the Pacific that they fought. It's just like that's wiped them out. Wiped them out of history. And even at this time, you've still got a massive in America, there's segregation. But then war happens, and it's like you've put them all together. Like you just assume they're all from America, so they'll all get along, and it's not like that at all. Yeah, well, it's just the human just fucking get on. Yeah, exactly. They're helping you fight the bad guy. Yeah, who is a white guy.
We all have the same enemy, effectively.
Yes. So let's fighting the Nazis. You are not my enemy. We're fighting on the same team. Just get over it.
Yeah, grow up. Put your big boy pants on.
I just don't get why some people just don't like other people just because of the colour of their skin. I just don't understand it.
Because they're not educated and they're stupid.
Yes, but it's just...
it's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, but it wasn't necessarily all doom and gloom. Some criminals used the war as an opportunity to become heroes. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Obviously, a number of them went off to fight in the war. But one prolific burglar, Eddie Chapman, was recruited in MI5.
Oh.
And he became a British double agent.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of like this character. He's a bit funny. He was also known as Agent Zigzag.
Which is going to zigzag.
Okay. He was so successful in duping the Germans that they had themselves awarded him the Iron Cross, which is similar to like an award we get here. So he was so good at sending messages to and from. So he was like obviously sending the Germans fake British intelligence and then was reporting back to the British like, this is what the Germans are going to do. When he returned to the UK in 1944, he was pardoned of all of his previous crimes and awarded a medal. However, he did kind of make a return to crime a few years after that. However, he was clever enough to avoid jail. So, like, he kind of was a war hero because he kind of helped us. His criminality was so good in, like, fraud and duping people that he managed to dupe the Germans. So, good on him for that. But it didn't completely, like, turn him back when he came back. He was just, like, he kind of returned to his life of crime when he came back.
Gave you a chance, Eddie. Come on.
Yeah, he ran off with it. I don't think it was, like, really serious crimes he was committing. I think it was more, like, little ones to, like, look for a bit of money to live comfortably off. Yeah, but he was clever enough now that he was like, I'm a hero, I can go away with this. Like, I'm not going to jail anymore.
It's like,
he was like, he was still naughty, but like for a little while he was kind of like, he was quite clever. And some of them genuinely did, like, they changed their life around because they would do this, obviously they were awarding money. Like, what they were awarded was much better than what they had before the war, so it kind of helped them get out of the criminality. But yeah, I liked him in particular because, like, he was a brilliant double agent. Yeah. Okay, so he's probably one of the, you know how we've had all these murderers that we've discovered that got into the wartime, like, reserve police and ended up murdering women. Like, they're the bad ones. Like, we probably helped them commit crimes, yet weirdly we had the criminals that we used to our advantage. And, like, this is one of those instances where we used a criminal to our advantage.
I think this is where, like, spy agencies are good at manipulation. They're like, oh, well, this person's kind of a piece of shit, but we can use that.
Yeah, use it to our advantage.
And then hopefully they come out through the side better.
To help us. Yeah. It paid off sometimes, basically. Okay, so then I always had, like, the question of, like, what happened to people that were already in prison, like, when the war broke out? Because obviously we're sending people off to do other things. Like, what did we do with them? Like, did we just let them all out or what? So basically, at the start of World War II, many prisoners were released from prisons, especially those that were very near the end of sentence. So, for example, in London in particular, anyone that had less than 3 months left to serve, or were at Borstal Boys, which is like a young offenders sort of thing, if they completed their 6 months, they were all sent out, but the majority of them, like, went up and served in the army anyway. They naturally just followed that progression. Then as the war progressed, a number of prisoners were drafted into the same unit and sent out to fight. So those that were seen as not as dangerous, they basically put them all in one big group, like a regiment, and sent them out.
Okay.
Then those that obviously they didn't send out or were seen as more high risk, they were placed into labour intensive jobs. So that would be like factory work, which they had to do with no pay. So they were like prison conditions, but outside of prison. So they would
Slave
be
labour.
Sort of, yeah. So basically, and obviously they wouldn't have really had any rights. So they wouldn't have just mixed them in with normal people. They'd have sent them to, like, one factory, and the police, like, prison officers would have followed them there.
Yeah. Keep an eye on them.
Keep an eye on them. They'd have had to do so many hours, and then they'd have returned to their prisons, to their cells. Okay. And then I managed to find a bit of a fun fact going back to the MI5. Did you know that MI5 moved its headquarters into Wormwood Scrubs, which was in West London, during World War II?
The prison?
Yeah, the actual prison. MI5 moved their headquarters in there.
Why?
I don't know, I guess, and they felt it was a good place to hide the headquarters. It was unfortunately bombed in the 1940s, and so most of the staff transferred to Blenheim Palace, which is obviously in Woodstock, which is near Oxford. So, yeah. Because I knew that some of them were in, like, the palaces, and they were obviously making use of these stately homes. I just presumed that's where all the covert and secret agent stuff done. But it didn't. It started off in prisons. But to be fair, they're quite well built. Like, the idea is like, escape.
They're old.
So, but also, like, I feel like they're quite kind of hard. The idea is people can't escape, so I should imagine they're also quite hard to penetrate into, if that makes sense. And they'd have all these quite deep underground. It'd be hard for other people to intercept, things through radios. Yeah. It'd be hard to intercept the information.
Yeah, because I just picture really old, like, thick walls, so they're built in medieval times. Not necessarily, but that's that's how it looks. So you think, nothing's going to damage that.
Yeah, but there you go. So they actually utilised prisons for MI5. Oh. I thought it was quite clever. I had never thought about anything like that.
No. Now they just turn them into hotels.
But yeah, so yeah, I always wondered as well what they did with the prisoners during the war. But basically, they utilised them.
I think I've kind of mentioned this before about the ghost army of World War II.
Is this like the witchy ones?
It's not witchy. I'm not sure where. I'm assuming it's near the coast, but the men that obviously couldn't go out to fight for war, they just kept making it look like there was an army base in a certain area, so it was like a ghost army, and they had like a really cool.
Are these like the ones where they built like the tanks out of cardboard?
Yeah.
To say like when the Germans were flying above that, they thought we had all this artillery. And we didn't.
Yeah, they built like entire towns out of like cardboard and stuff. So from above, it looks like there's an army there,
which is brilliant until you get a rainy day.
I think it was a bit more than just cardboard, but
yeah, no, I know what you mean.
But they're like sigil or whatever. It's really good. It's a ghost with like electric.
Oh, that looks really cool. No, I've not seen it. I'll have to have a look into that a bit more.
See if I can find it. But no, I like the cleverness.
It's really clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but it's so silly you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And you think, how did it work?
Yeah.
But they executed it so well. And you think like, you should think like, surely Germans are a bit more intelligent than that to work it out, but obviously not.
They were looking into the occult and whether like stuff actually worked. So
because was it My Sybil Leek that they believed she was a spy?
Yeah.
Oh no, that is cool.
That is cool. Yeah. The little ghost army of World War II.
But yeah, so yeah, police and like I said, it was a bit stunted in the middle, like within World War One. The war kind of got in the way. But I think we saw a massive transformation in terms of the types of crime. In the sense that obviously lots of inventions changed, but also you had cars now, so like you could start having like people were using getaway cars and things like, whereas that wasn't really a thing before. And yeah, I think it adapted how crime happened. Then obviously we had with the whole rationing, I think fraud became a big problem, and it's not that people weren't fraudulent before. It's just I don't think things were documented that well. Like you almost didn't need to have a fraud, if that makes sense. Like, you know, now people were having passports, people were traveling around the world, so like you needed documentation for things, and all of a sudden it opened that whole world of it was a new way for criminals to take advantage of things.
I think it's also there was kind of like a need for the fraud because a ration book, you're in need of something.
Yeah, and like it was very hard to get hold of everything, and it's kind of clever on the criminals front. Obviously not ideal for the people then, because lots of people were getting caught because they had like fraudulent tickets, and it was trying to work out, did they fraud the tickets or did they buy them off someone else? And obviously the chances are they bought it all off someone else. But yeah, definitely it's hard because you look at the newspapers of the time and they tried to post it as quite a positive sort of thing, and you get why they did it, because they want to keep everyone's morale up, but actually the reality is that like crime was at its worst.
Well, I think humanity was probably at its worst.
I think there was an element as well. I want to say it was about after World War II that it also changed people's views quite a bit on death penalty, because we'd had the whole Holocaust, and I think people were sort of questioning whether they felt the death penalty was like the right thing to do for people in terms of like as a punishment for murder. Because I don't think it's long after the Second World War that they abolish the death penalty in the UK.
Is it the 60s?
I'm not sure. I thought it was the 50s.
It might be 50s. I can't remember. I'm trying to think.
I'll have a look at it if I want to do
person.
the next decade. But
Sure, it's either 50s or 60s. I'm thinking 60 might have been the last time someone was hung.
Yeah.
Or hanged, however you say it.
No, I always get confused about which one it is. But yeah, no, I think already by this time there was already a big shift anyway. I think there already had been from like the early 1900s. I think a lot more people, especially if they were young, they were more like commuting them like to life in prison rather than killing them. It'd already seen a decrease in quite a bit of years, but yeah, I think the Holocaust was kind of like the final sort of nail in the head. It was a bit like, we don't really want to go around killing everyone now. Like, there's been too much killing.
Yeah, it's like, why is it right for us to do it when this person literally wiped 6 million people off the planet?
And I think also the advances maybe helped. They realised that lots of those people they thought were guilty
were actually innocent.
And I think it brings a lot of things into question. So, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Like I said, there wasn't much scientific stuff going on at this time, so there wasn't many advances.
There's a lot going on in the world.
Yeah, it's more the way we've policed that sort of changed. Yeah, and I think this is the first time like women are really starting to, because obviously they weren't allowed. I think it was either 1915 or 1919 was the first female officer that had it as like a paid role. But like I said, the numbers dwindled. I think, like I said, by the 30s we had over 60,000 officers, but only just under 300 of them were women. And then the war.
What's
the
that,
reserve.
like 0.2%?
Tiny amount.
Yeah.
But even after the war, it wasn't a massive amount, but they did increase. But I think it wasn't really seen as a woman's job, was it? I think even now, proportionally, there's still a lot less women in it than there is men.
I think because you say policeman, it's just ingrained in your brain.
Head,
Not saying that's right.
Yeah, it's you should say like police officer. Shouldn't you?
Not policeman or fireman.
But it's just habit, isn't it? It's like how you brought up. But you do traditionally, like, it's not the first thing I would think of going to do.
I don't mean it as like it's a fireman. It's a fireman.
Yeah, but that's like
their last name.
When it was like when the job was created.
Yeah, it's a fireman.
It was like it's a job that a man did. So like it's where the job came from.
Yeah.
Because I know this is what I don't get. There was something about, I want to say it was the Kleenex tissues or something. You know, like the man-sized tissues.
Size.
They're like, you can't have that anymore. And I was like, who's actually offended by that? Because I've never looked at it and think, oh my goodness, I can't use a tissue because I'm a woman. Like,
or the Yorkie.
Yeah.
So it's chocolate made for men or something.
Yeah.
And
it's
like, why?
I'm not that offended by it. Do you know what I mean? Like, just leave it as it was. Like, there is some things where I think they've took it too far.
Yeah.
And I just think, just leave it as it was. Like, when it was created, like, that's just how it was. And they never stipulated that people, like, women couldn't use it. It was just, that's what was created at the time. I don't think you necessarily need to change them. Because even when Yorkies first came out, like, I'm pretty certain women were eating them. I don't think they brought them out and were like, this is a chocolate bar that can only be eaten by a man. Like,
because it will give you a massive penis.
Yeah.
I think also if I went down the route of, like, being a police officer or a fireman, I would be like, I'm a police...
a fire officer?
Firefighter?
Oh, yeah, firefighter. There we go.
I think I'd just call myself a fireman.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, or you just say work for the fire service.
I'm a fireman.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't think about it. Because, like, even ambulance, I think, is the only one where it's remained, like, neutral. Like, you're an ambulance technician.
Yeah, because I don't see it as a gendered role.
Yeah.
Just call it has man at the end, but so does woman.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I don't see the whole, like, I agree in, like, equal rights for women and everything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that, but I don't see why we need to change things that have already happened. Like, it's in history. Like, let's move forward.
I mean, when I'm speaking to other people, I try and say the correct term.
Yeah.
But in my head, I'm like, fireman.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I think it's one of those things like you have to let, like, history be history.
Yes.
Like, you can't try and just erase it because you don't.
Yeah.
Like, it's not what we think is appropriate anymore. I just think, like, going forward.
Yeah.
Don't name them those things, but the things that have already been named, that, like, don't take them. Because wasn't the one with, is it mother care or something, and there was a baby one, and they were like, we should change it to, like, parent care or something, and I was like, but tradition, like, it's women that have
the mother gives birth.
Yeah.
Whether the mother is around or not. Or,
yeah. And I was just like, I get it. Yes, men still take care.
Or there's same-sex parents. Yeah.
But I don't see why a whole shop or, like, company should have to change it from mother care to parent care. Like, that's the company name. It's
especially if it's from a mother creating it, and she's like, well, I named it after me.
Yeah, it's
doing it for my child.
It's just a company name. It's not saying, oh, it's mother care. Oh no, dads can't buy any of these products. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. It's weird. I've gone on a weird rant now at the end of this episode.
It's just because it's policeman.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for today's episode.
Yeah.
On that note, keep creeping. Oh, was that
You've
right?
done it
I've
again.
done it again.
You say
in the meantime,
keep creeping.
We'll keep digging.